Okay, ramping up. We're about to get into our informative speeches. So I want to spend some time with you. This is a very focused video lecture on how to pull together a long form outline. And so I'm going to walk through the format that I already put on Canvas, so it's been there. But let me take you through it. So if you don't have that kind of discipline to sit there and look at something online, let me take you through. So Sarah Putman, don't know her. She must have graduated or been in this class before I started teaching, and so this was sent to me from another professor as an example of a really good layout. An outline for an informative speech, and I loved it. I think it's great. Now, I'm going to take you into the world that is going on in my head when I want to punch these things up. You will always hear me say things like, "There's not enough meat on the bones." Like, this has to be well researched. Every point. Remember from our previous lecture, the Spider-Man, right? Is everything has to be linked together and forwarding a narrative against your theses. And then I could always find opportunity. It's just how I'm wired. Doesn't mean I don't think that this is an A paper, because this is totally an A paper. So the bar is high, but again, even an A paper can usually, with another perspective, come up to another level. Or just be tightened up. So, I used to say that in graduate school all the time. It's not tight. And I can visualize, just taking a screw and just making the thing tighter. So we're going to talk through the strategic logic of the speech, if I can even remember it. This is, I do this every year, so we'll just take us on that journey, and I'll just kind of riff on what I'm thinking when I'm looking at this long form outline. So your long form outline has enough support for each of your points where I know it's going to logically flow and just be a smooth narrative that you can easily bring to life with a live presentation by PowerPoint. You're not presenting this outline to anybody but me. Nobody will see this. Just I'll have it to check your logic and to make sure your research is good and that what you're telling us is factual and true. A short form outline, I believe I mentioned this already, is just a one-pager of this. So you don't put all of the written notes. You just put like keywords that will help you remember. Like, what's the trigger word for my attention getter? Let's go ahead and just go into it. But anyway, so you just like couple words, but it's never more than a page. And don't squish everything onto a page. It's just when I see the word rainstorm, I know I'm going to tell the story about when I was a kid and a tornado came to town, da-da-da-da. So I'm not going to write the whole story out. You have to give me enough to go on in the long form that I know what rainstorm means. So that's what the point of the rainstorm. So it's to get you grounded in the story you're about to tell. It's also to let me have something to grade. So I'm grading your live presentations off of your delivery. It's like 45% of your grade. And then the rest of it is this. I'm looking at the flow of logic and the quality of your research and your ability to bring together an interesting idea to an audience. So, okay, Titanic is the topic. What's your purpose? You're going to inform. Everybody will have that purpose. Theses. From the disaster to the movie, the sinking of the Titanic remains one of the most famous tragedies in history. Okay, the theses, I want to tweak it right away. From the disaster to the movie. It's a movie that wasn't even a documentary, so it's a movie about the Titanic. Certainly the movie was very famous, but the Titanic on its own merits was certainly among the great tragedies of history. So I'm with you on that. I'm not sure what the movie means in the theses. Intention getter. So an American writer named Morgan Robertson once wrote a book called The Wreck of the Titan. The book was about an unsinkable ship called the Titan that set sail from England to New York with many rich and famous passengers on board. On its journey, the Titan hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sunk. Many lives were lost because there were not enough lifeboats. So what's so strange about this? Well, the wreck of the Titan was written 14 years before the Titanic sank. Is that true? Is that true? I mean, right away I would be like in awe in your audience. I would absolutely go and check your research. For now, I'm going to assume that's true because I have chills. Like, wow, that's my chill factor. All the hair goes up on my arms. They go, wow, what a prophecy, right? If that is true, I mean, it's exactly what happened. So that is kind of wild, and it would get my attention. So an attention getter is that hook. You have only a few seconds, as I already spoke on, like in advertising. I say we have 3 seconds to get your commercial before you switch the channel. Similarly, your audience is going to be into your topic or not. And your attention getter is what's going to give them some, idea of what we're going to sit through for the next 7 minutes. And we hopefully want to lean in versus just tolerate. So get them to lean in. I mean, so that's what your attention getter is going to do. I've had students do things like, and I want to push you with the attention getter. Many students just start like, okay, so select, because you're nervous. It just makes it worse for you because now we're not as engaged. It's going to make you more nervous. So be brave. Just get our attention. I had a student he was actually it was a commemorative speech. It was for his coach, and he was just talking. This was in the spring of 2020 when the COVID crisis started and everyone had to go home and quarantine until we knew what was going on. But he's like, we all miss our sports and we miss our coach. And then he started his speech with a whistle. And then he came into the screen and he sat down. His attention getter was literally blowing a whistle. Got our attention. We're like, it was early, but hey, it was great. It's creative. You can do anything. Just get our attention and make sure it's on topic. So reason to listen. I don't think this is in your outline format, so you don't need to have all of this detail in your long form outline, but it's just stuff to be thinking about. Okay, so our reason to listen is the sinking of the Titanic was one of the largest non-war related disasters in history, and it's important to be knowledgeable about the past. Yeah, I'm good with that. Easy statement. From the disaster to the movie, again, I'm struggling with that. The sinking of the Titanic remains one of the most famous tragedies in history. Credibility statement. I don't require this, again, but something to think through. What gives you the authority to talk about this? Well, I've been fascinated about the history of the Titanic for as long as I can remember. Good. I have a passionate presenter. Somebody who's passionate is going to dig in, is going to be curious. It's the most important quality, I think, that you can bring to any writing assignment is curiosity. Curiosity opens doors, right? So here's a person who's fascinated about the history. I imagine as someone who's fascinated has spent some time learning about the history. Number 2, I've read and studied many collections of books about the Titanic many times, and I've done research on the internet. Wonderful. I have a feeling I could just like sit back now and learn, because I have a feeling that you know what you're talking about. So you can bring that into your early, just kind of a warm up. I would consider that your warm up before you jump into your slides, is just talk to your audience. But think about what gives you the credibility, why we should listen to you. Then preview of main points. So here's our first. We're into the Titanic itself. So we're going to get a lot of the history and a lot of the data. So imagine I see visuals in my mind. I mean, you could have all of this data on a chart before we go into it, but I want to see the beast. I want to see this ship. Right? So the Titanic was thought to be the largest, safest, most luxurious ship ever built. She's probably going to bring all those things, all those ideas to life. Large, safe, luxurious. So at the time of her launch, ships are hers. She was the biggest existing ship on the largest movable object ever built, and the largest movable object. So, according to this book, The Extraordinary Story of Unsinkable Ship, the Titanic was... you don't even have to lead with all of the according to this book. in your live presentation, it's great in an outline, but when you go live, you can just hit us with the facts, so we just stay engaged, right? Because we don't have time to Google Tibbles and his book, The Unsinkable Ship. You can reference it at a very high level. You might say the whole thing. I mean, it's not wrong, but sometimes if you wanted to just get us the impact right away, that it's the largest, safest, most luxurious ship, hit us with the facts. I'm sure those facts are true. 882 feet feels like a very specific fact. So this ship was 882 feet long. It weighed about 46,000 tons. And then you can tell us it's about 6 million elephants, whatever it is, right? You could, Alexa, give me, you find different parallels. The idea is sometimes, you'll throw numbers at us and we're not sure how to imagine 46,000 tons. Is that 70 trucks? Maybe. I guess it depends what's in the trucks. I don't know. So sometimes, sometimes you can complicate it with these analogies. So use your best judgment. This was 100 feet longer than, here it is, she does it, 100 feet longer than, and 15,000 tons heavier than the world's current largest ships. Perfect. That's what I'm looking for, right? So she gives us some reference. So when you say it weighed this, is that good, bad, more or less? I don't know. I don't have a reference. I don't usually hang around ships. But 100 feet longer, that's long. That's a football field? How long is a football field? And you could do something like that, so that we go, what's 100 feet now? That's more containable. That's more, you could, presence it to your audience. And 15,000 tons heavier than the world's largest ships. Perfect. Thresh stated in Titanic, this is a different book. Okay, published in 1992. Who cares? I mean, you could put it in there. This is perfect for the long form, but you don't present this. That the Titanic accommodated around 2,300 passengers, and that's just it. So I'd say it's 882 feet long. That's 100 feet longer than the other ships. It was 46,000 tons. That's about 15,000 tons heavier than most ships, and it accommodated, a substantial number of people. So we're talking 2,300, specifically 2,345 passengers, and 860 crew members. So that's the equivalent of, and I'd probably do an analogy there too, since you've done it already with the other ones. So that was good. Now she's going into luxurious. So she hit largest, and now she's hitting luxurious. In point 2, the beautiful accommodations of the Titanic were decorated and furnished with only the finest items. Everything has been done in regard to the furniture and fittings to make the first class accommodation more than equal to that provided in the finest hotels on shore. It was a quote. Who said it? These are things that you could have in text citing, or you could have, I think it's very valuable on your slides when you can just literally put the source of the information in the slide on the bottom. You don't have to necessarily make us think about the book that you read to get the information. Just keep hitting us with the information. It moves your presentation along more quickly, and then we're not having to deal with, who's this person? But, from my research, that's how you do it. You say, from my research, I learned that everything that was done with regard to the furniture and the fittings to make that it was designed to make the first class accommodation more equal to that of the finest hotels. Suites located in the ship consisted of a sitting room, 2 bedrooms, 2 wardrobe rooms, private bath, and a lavatory. Yeah, and when I would deliver this, when I'm in the part about luxurious accommodations, romance it. Romance the heck out of luxurious, right? You want to make us have more of that experience so you're not just hitting us with the details. But this would probably be on PowerPoint. I don't think there's much more you can do unless you had an artifact from the Titanic. But you would, have your slides up there. But what are the visuals here? Don't just throw. You could have, and this is where a short form outline will help you. You don't have to have all the numbers up here. We don't have to see. The first class dining room was the largest on any liner. They could serve over 500 passengers. Like have the long dining room table, right? Show us the actual pictures of the dining room. I'm sure they're in archives somewhere. Find that, put that on the visual, and then you speak the point about 500 passengers in one sitting. So you see how you're going to use this tool and the PowerPoint to be a much more simplified version of what we're looking at here. And then you memorize this long form outline, guys. You memorize it, so you just have trigger words in your note cards in front of you, or your short form outline, and you know what by this time you've rehearsed it enough that you know what you're going to say. But the slides that we're looking at are simple, so we're just listening to you as a storyteller, and we're getting the impact of what you have to say through the visuals and through the way in which you're delivering this information. But take a little breath. Use silence. Like I said, silence is so powerful. It included a squash court, 3 seconds, swimming pool, a library, because you don't want us to be flashing stuff at us, but you go, okay, library, barbershop, Turkish baths. Okay, by this point, you see, because I'm delivering it so slowly and each beat has some impact, now there's a reason that you're giving us all this information. It's to have us have that experience of the bigness of this thing. The Titanic was widely believed to be the safest ship ever built. So going back here, she did a very nice job. So she's got large, safe, luxurious. So she's gonna hit it. This is her building one. Building one, she's killing it. This is great. Sybils, as previously cited, described the Titanic as having an outer layer that shielded an inner layer. So the ship had a double bottom that was created to keep the water out of the ship if the outer layer was pierced. That's so sad. I mean, this really is a tragedy if you think about it. It's supposed to be this divine experience. I mean, I really can feel it now just thinking about it. The bottom of the ship was divided into 16 watertight compartments equipped with automatic watertight doors. The doors could be closed immediately if the water were to enter into the compartments. Because of these safety features, the Titanic was deemed unsinkable. That's the great irony, the tragic irony, to be called the unsinkable ship and then literally sink. Well, how many voyages sink? Hopefully not many. I don't know. I never researched it, but yeah, that's tragic. So then she transitions. I think her transitions are a little clumsy. It's just clunky, right? So if you're talking to an audience, now that I've discussed the Titanic itself, I want to discuss the tragedy that occurred on its maiden voyage. It's perfect for a long form outline. Just, you know that you're going to need a transition. But I want you to be thinking about having an audience in front of you. So I wouldn't have just been, really bringing you in to an experience of this unsinkable ship. A better transition is simpler. It's like, I don't have to say now that I've just discussed it. I was there. You don't have to remind me. You could just sort of start with, so now I want to take you into the tragedy on its maiden voyage. Maiden is already a big idea. That means the first voyage. Right? Like this wasn't like a commuter ship. This was its maiden voyage. So scratch the first part of that, the first phrase there. And so now I want to talk to you about what occurred on its maiden voyage. The Titanic hit a disaster head-on when it ran into an iceberg 4 days after its departure. I wouldn't say it like that. You're telling a story. Perfect, again, for a long-form outline. In her storytelling, though, when you go to present it, you'd say, the ship set sail on this date. It's probably in here. Yeah, April 10th, 1912, destined for New York. It left from Queenstown in Ireland. Oh, it left in Ireland. I didn't realize that. It departed from Queenstown in Ireland at 1:30 in the afternoon. It was heading for New York. The weather was perfect for sailing. There was a blue sky, light winds, a calm ocean. Again, if you're going to do the slideshow thing, boom, boom, and each slide now this one could have a second each. blue sky, or one slide just has blue sky, light winds. But you want to get us present again to something that's going to have some tension. Like you're ramping up to something here. The Atlantic Ocean was like a polished plate of glass on the night of April 14th, this according to Walter Lord in A Night to Remember. Again, just flip things around so it's smooth when you go to present. Again, that's all you're doing. You're talking to us. That's I don't know why people ever get scared. Because it feels like you're being judged. I know that. Just know you're not. It's safe. You're fine. And no one's judging you, but they're all rooting for you anyway. We want to see, just like we want to be entertained. That's all. That's all you're doing. And informed. You want to be educated in an interesting way. So, okay, number 2. The journey took a horrible turn when the ship struck an iceberg and it began to sink. I might do a little bit more build to that. It's like it just took off at this time, and then it sank. Again, she's going to go into the details. So now you're telling us a story. So for 4.5 days, it was a dream. It was amazing. And then it hit an iceberg. You know, the largest part of the iceberg was underwater. And while that's true, you got to, like, what? You know, like, it's almost, it's an accident, but, like, you know, they didn't see it coming. There was nothing on the radar. Some of the ship's watertight compartments had been punctured, and the first 5 compartments rapidly filled with water. So again, do a little bit more building around the storytelling, but in terms of the detail, it's very good and it's well researched. And then you want to think about the storytelling part of it. Distress rockets were fired and distress signals were sent out, but there were no ships close enough to arrive in time. As the ship went down, some were rescued, but the majority of passengers had no place to go. Oh my God. Right? All those passengers, all those people. Ugh. And then you're just going, okay, I was just whining and dining and dancing and spying myself on this wonderful, luxurious ship. And we're going to sink, and I need to get out of here. There's only 20 lifeboats on the ship. They probably thought, because we'll never need them, right? 20 lifeboats. Outrageous. And so as you're finding the research, get present to what you're learning. And you know, the crew, yes sir, you go first. I mean, what the heck? The lifeboats were filled quickly with women and children loaded first. Ship eventually disappeared from sight. By 2:20 in the morning on Monday, it broke in half and it slowly slipped under the water. 4:10 a.m., the Carpathia answered Titanic's distress call and it arrived to rescue those floating in the lifeboats. Yeah, for 2 hours in the icy ocean with sharks. Right. Lynch reported in the end, 1,500 lives were lost. So now that you've learned about the history of the Titanic, I'll discuss the movie that was made about it. Yeah, definitely, I remember now. This was where I have like, what? Why? A movie depicting the Titanic and a group of fictional characters was made. There are so many documentaries. Like, you gave us all of the real. I mean, I guess you could talk about the movie. It's not wrong. It's just weird. I feel like you could either do a presentation just on the movie, The Titanic, and then if that's your lead, then your support would be what really happened. So how was, like, to me, a better thesis would have been, you know, how fiction meets, actually this is a good thesis, because given the way she opened it with her AGO, it would be, you know, how fiction meets reality, or this was prophesied, you know, like, so you can sort of see, like, even the prophecy was a fictional prophecy, but it actually happened. And then you could start to look at, is the story, the fictional story, James Cameron, about the Titanic, you know, he did a ton of research for the movie, but he had to romance it, right? We don't know if if that happened, you know. No, it didn't happen. He had to write that, right? There's no research to have evidence of this, you know, crazy romance on the ship. with Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. As characters, right? But so he had to write that part. So, so of course you take creative liberties in movies that are not they're based on a true story, but they're telling you a new story or what could have happened inside that story. So that's what based on is. Anyway, so you could do, if you're going to bring in the movie, then talk about, how closely it mirrored reality. Is it just based on it? But where did it go on to its own departures? What we do know is the size of the ship and the scale and the scope and what happened and the timing and the night and but I don't know that movie is true enough to actually reference. So the making of the Titanic was extremely expensive and it involved a lot of hard work. According to this film, it had a $250 million budget. They had a replica was constructed in Baja California, Mexico. In 17 million gallon oceanfront tank. It's interesting. He assembled an expedition to dive to the wreck on the ocean floor to film the footage that was later used in the opening scenes of the movie. He further explained in his book that the smallest details were attended to according to imprinting of the 1,000 pieces of china, the crystals, cutlery. Yeah, I think you would have a better thesis versus talking about the fame of it. I think fame is a stretch, but if you wanted to bring in this movie idea, you could do it, but your thesis set me up kind of weird. The movie was extremely successful. Now, this point is always... Kramer reported it made $600 million. It was the number one hit movie. I think she's going off of the fame idea here. But now I feel like we're just talking Hollywood shop, right? It's a little bit of a departure. It made $1.8 billion worldwide. It's also number one movie of all time worldwide. As of this date, whatever the date of this was, Titanic was nominated for a record 8 Golden Globe Awards. And only a few weeks after its release, it won 4. It was nominated for a record 14 Academy Awards. It won 11. Yeah, it was an amazing film if you haven't seen it. But I'm left talking about the film, and the film feels like it's overshadowing the event. Isn't there documentaries where we can then... I would rather see point 3 be about the real-life event to say what really happened, because we didn't really learn anything about the movie here, just that it was a blockbuster. And so you can imagine it would be. I'm sure there'll be movies in the future about 9/11 that will be blockbusters. But do we want to learn about the movie in the context of the tragedy? It just feels a little clunky in this design against that thesis. Conclusion, review the main points. So first, today I discussed the Titanic itself. Second, I discussed the sinking of the ship. Finally, I discussed the movie. I don't like that. I mean, some of your books tell you to repeat the main points, but you don't have to do it so heavy-handed. So let's see. In conclusion, remember the wreck of the Titan. Okay. Yeah, what did we land on? And I think, so your theses and your conclusion go hand in hand. Best friends. So you're driving to something, and right now what it does is it lands on 3 solid pieces of information. But what's the takeaway for us? That's your conclusion. So you really want to stir that. So if I were saying, sometimes life does imitate art, and sometimes art imitates life, that might have been a different conclusion to the other theses around fiction and nonfiction if she offered it up that way. And this one, this idea that from the disaster of the movie, the sinking of the Titanic remains one of the most famous tragedies. It's famous because we made a blockbuster movie. That's still a weird idea. So, in conclusion, remember the wreck of the Titans, the story written 14 years before the Titanic sank. It now seems as if the entire prophecy or a case of life is imitating art. This is right. Whenever the case, the loss of lives on the Titanic was tremendous, and it was something that should have never been forgotten. Okay, if that is your conclusion, life imitating art, that should actually kind of be that's a better thesis. the most famous tragedies. I see what she's doing. She's trying to not be redundant. It's just not tight on an idea. It needs one more turn. But listen, this was a great. Do I have her research? We're excited. Yes, I do, and that makes me very happy because now when I go to research her research, I know exactly where to find it all. So again, when you go to present it live, you're good to put all of the reference and stuff like that into the text if she has it here. That's great. You don't have to say it as you present. Just have it on the slide. Have it just in the sources on the bottom so we can see it. And oftentimes I like to see the date that you found your research, especially if it's a contemporary issue, because sometimes I'll see students who are arguing something, but their research is really old. And I know just from my own reading that things have moved on. So I do look at the sources on your slides, and I do like to see when you pulled that research was conducted. So stuff to be thinking about. Overall, this is an A+ paper. I mean, I would have no complaints. I might give her the note that the theses landed kind of weird. There's just so much information out there. And real live documentaries, I think that would have been much more revealing of the topic matter of the Titanic versus, you know what I mean? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, this is not wrong. It just takes us in a little bit of a departure from the Titanic, and it takes us off into Hollywood around the making of the Titanic. It's a bit more behind the scenes kind of thing. Anyway, so I would still give this an A with a couple little notes, and then of course I would love to see how she brought that together for an audience. But this was great. So it's actually a lot better than some of the material I'm getting. So I want you guys to really follow through every point. Really, really think through your own logic. And this just helps me with the grading. And helps you pull together a great speech. Do not do a disservice to your long form outline. It's just, often I really don't like them. I always start just by writing my slides, and then I do a lot of moving around. You could start however you want to start, but just know it has to be grounded in logic flow. That's all an outline is, flow of logic. And does everything hang off of that thesis? Does that thesis take me to a strong conclusion? Stick the landing on your conclusion. Here it was a little bit throwaway. And I tell you why it was throwaway, because the thesis was a little weak. Right? So if you really want to leave us with an impact of something and you're not getting there in your conclusion, go back to your thesis. And I'm talking just noodle with it. She didn't have to change anything. All the content was pretty good. If she wanted to keep the movie in, James Cameron's movie, she could. I would reframe how you're offering it to us so we know why we're listening to that piece of information. Well, that's an overview of long form outlines. So get started on yours.